everybody. Welcome back to our final episode of Chasing Frets for the week. My name is Jason Shadrick, and I'm here with Andy Ellis. How are you, man?
I am doing well, and boy, do I enjoy talking about guitar. And thank you, everyone, for giving me a chance to listen to great players like Julian and ask them questions and riff about our favorite instrument.
Yes, of course, and with one of our favorite players. And today, we kind of peel back the curtain a little bit on what kind of the mentorship and apprenticeship scene was like for Julian when he was growing up, because he was probably the definition of a child prodigy. I mean, there's video on YouTube of him playing with Santana at a huge amphitheater when he's like 10 or 11 or something,
Well, there's this movie too,
and
Jules
the movie
at 8.
Yep.
Yeah.
There was
8-year-old Julian.
Documentary of it.
Yeah, documentary. Someone felt inspired enough by this 8-year-old kid to make a documentary.
And so in this episode, Julian talks about his important mentors growing up, and also one of those probably being most notably Gary Burton, who he was. So Julian was probably one of the last guitar players to kind of serve in that long lineage of jazz guitar players in his bands. But what I thought was really interesting is how he reflects on going from mentoree to mentor, and it seems to me that how he speaks about the lessons he's learned from all these mentors whoever ends up being the young kid in Julian's band someday will be pretty lucky.
Yep.
Yeah. So check out this final episode this week with Julian Lage, and we'll be back next week. Today's episode of Chasing Frets is brought to you by Collings Guitars, and more specifically their new 470 JL that was designed in collaboration with Julian Lage. It's an entirely new hollow body design that Julian and the crew at Collings Guitars have been working on for years. It was designed from the ground up to have the feel, tonal range, and aesthetic qualities that were exciting to both Julian and the crew at Collings. The guitar features Ron Ellis Dynasonic pickups, a Bigsby B3 tremolo, and a unique trestle block construction that was developed by Collings. The 470 JL will be released officially in January and will be available to order through authorized Collings dealers. So head on over to collingsguitars.com and check it out.
Well, it's so great, Julian, to be back with you again and talk about guitar, get into the nuts and bolts, and also kind of the metaphysical side, which is something I'd like to explore a little bit in this episode. Yeah. And the way I can frame it is to look at the importance as a young musician, developing musician, the importance of having a musical mentor or musical mentors. And I'm specifically thinking of Gary Burton, for one, because when I was in high school, Gary's first guitarist was Larry Coryell, and then subsequently Mick Goodrick, Pat Metheny, John Schofield, and our guest today, Julian Lage. Right. So the question is, there's so much to learn about being a professional musician beyond the notes on the fretboard, beyond how you hold a pick. It's how to conduct yourself, how to survive, how to have integrity. How have these things come to you, and who can you point to who have steered you in your development in these realms?
Well, I just want to underline what a good question that is, because I feel very honored to be here today and talking about it. And what it makes me think of is that every guitar player has thought about that, whether it's conscious or unconscious, of pursuing somebody who they just get the sense that person could help them with a little bit of this or help with a lot of it. But I just think the fact that we're talking about it is healthy, because sometimes the rhetoric goes that it's every person for themselves, and you're either great or you're not, and sorry, And my experience is there's no one who grows within the musical community and does wonderful things who isn't deeply connected to a whole network of mentors, teachers, even their own students. It's a community-based thing. So I'm glad we're talking about it. Simply put, it all for me stems from my family. My family is my parents and siblings. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. I have 3 sisters and a brother. They're all creative and do wonderful things and really badasses in their fields. And growing up, there was a sense in the family that, okay, if there's something you're interested in, let's help you follow that, and cultivate it. And I remember being young and just noticing that my parents always had a very clear line of questioning, not for me, but about, okay, well, if you're into that, who should you study with? Okay, so we'll call that teacher on Monday. Okay, hey, can you, yeah, okay, do the thing, go take the lesson. I study with someone for 6 months, and along the way, I would realize who that person studied with. They'd say, oh, they'd mention their teacher when they were growing up in the Bay Area. So my parents would say, well, can we get their number? Okay, so who did you say? Let's get a lesson with them. And it was this thing where it was a really, as I reflect on it now, it's a really delicate and effective way of being kind of mentored and nurtured, is just facilitate asking the question, what needs to be done to make this thrive? And though I think that's kind of like, well, of course, that's how it should work, it doesn't go that way a lot. I've noticed, it can say, well, you could have a line of question that says, well, this is great. How do we let the most people know about it? You can say, this is great. Don't go further. How do we stop this and like almost put it in a glass case, But this was always a line of questioning that said, well, okay, if someone at your level, what would they need, and who do we ask? And if we don't know the answer, we'll find out. And it's like being a detective. So, being a mentor and mentorship and research are connected. This evolved, and all the teachers I had growing up, from Robert Jones, the Bay Area, Chris Pimentel, Randy Vincent, of course. I spent a summer in Boston studying with Mick Goodrick when I was around 13. That's when I first met him. All of this kind of orbited to like non-academic mentors for me. And the first being David Grisman, who I met when I was about 10 at a guitar show in that one in Marin. I met him. I knew his son, Monroe, because he worked at the local guitar store. He kept talking about his dad, and I go, oh, yeah, my dad, you should be my dad. I didn't know who his dad was. And then he said, my dad's going to be at the show. So I went and, oh, your dad's David Grisman. Cool. So we played, and that was wonderful. And then David asked me to make my first recording, which was with him on a record called Dog Duos. And it was Grisman with a bunch of people. That, fast forward a couple of years, is when Gary Burton saw me. I was playing on the Grammys, and he was in the audience for that particular telecast. So very old school, like, he wrote me a letter and said, hey, I saw you, I enjoyed it, I have a gig, would you like to play with me? And the rest is history there in a way. So as I reflect on it now, it's like the family unit, it's your actual teachers, and then they're in my case, there are these professional musicians who I really only interfaced with through recordings and shows. And I'm blown away about how how complete and full featured that is as an education. It's incredible. In other words, I don't take a second of that for granted. And I recognize that each one of those pieces painted the picture that you alluded to before of a complete person, someone who can comport themselves professionally, academically, within the family structure, and also I think just understanding, and this is important to specify, that the goal was never to be famous or anything. It was more to be able to sustain a life of music. Like that's a different goal, I think, than, well, but how does this turn into a career? And I none of that. It was just to sustain the privilege of getting up and playing your guitar and having the space and time to do it, which to me is such an ultimate privilege. What do you do to protect that? And all those factions help support it in different ways.
Mm-hmm. As I was making a list of people you've, older musicians who you've played with, another name on this list I would love to hear you talk about is your work with Fred Hersch.
Oh yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
one of my favorite piano players ever. And
Yeah.
and even going back to that record he did with Bill Frisell, that's one of the
I
first times
love
where
that
like I really
record.
felt like I got jazz, like I understood
Yeah.
that there are these tunes and then they play the melodies and then they do this thing. So tell me a little bit about your relationship with Fred and some things you've learned with him.
Well, I don't want to second that. Say ditto. Fred is a master, master musician. And if, I was a fan. Yeah, I grew up in Santa Rosa, California, and Healdsburg Jazz Festival was looking back now, is this very important festival, not only for the region, but just in the pantheon of great jazz festivals that presents really, really special music. Started and run by Jessica Felix. She was friends with Fred, and Fred used to play a lot in that area. Fred's dad, I believe, lives in Healdsburg. So there was this. I was always kind of like, okay, Fred sounds amazing. I had that record with Frizzell. One day I'm going to get to him. Even though I was around him a lot at the festival, I was shy. I didn't say anything. Fast forward many years, I was in college. I was going to Berklee College of Music in Boston. I went to get coffee at the Starbucks across from New England Conservatory. I walk in, I saw Fred there, and I had some sort of courage, and I said, Mr. Hersch, I'm so sorry to bother you. My name's Julian Lage. I'm a huge fan, and we have connections through Jessica Felix and Healdsburg Jazz. He said, "Oh, I know. Yeah, I know who you are." So, okay, cool. I said, "Well, the reason I'm bugging you is to pay my respects and also to ask for a lesson." And he said, "Well, I'd love to teach you, but my piano's getting worked on in New York this week, so you can't come. But how about I just let you know when it's fixed and you come for a lesson?" I said, "Great." So a month later, whatever it was, I go to New York. I get the email. He says, "I'm ready. The piano's ready. Come over." And I played, he said, "What do you want to study?" We played something together. It felt great. I think I played him a solo guitar piece maybe, or a standard. And he said, "Well, here's some things you could think about, try adding more bass there and this and that." And then within short order, I want to say it was within like a week or 2 weeks, he said, I got a call from me. He said, "Hey, I've got this annual series at the Jazz Standard in New York where it's all duos and trios. Would you like to be one of my guests on one of the nights?" It seemed like we had a good rapport. So I said, "Yeah, of course." So from then on, that started a long-term collaboration. We piano and guitar famously, I think it's all lies, but people will say the piano and guitar don't work well together. And for reasons I don't need to go into now, I think that's wrong. I think they work beautifully together. It's just finding the partner that you want to be with. But the sonorities are gorgeous. So Fred and I quickly realized we were after the same thing of like this piano guitar, like a big orchestral sound where I'm playing contrapuntally, he's playing contrapuntally, and it all just works out. In that case, per our topic today, the mentorship is so palpable, because it's like, come with me, we're making music together, be a part of my show, feel what it's like to be in my orbit. And from that very privileged place, I always made it a point to ask a lot of questions, So I would be with Fred and I would notice that we're now playing the 8th song of the rehearsal of his that's just drop dead amazing. And that's the point where I go, "Fred, do you have any tips for writing this kind of song, or what pencils do you use? Whatever it is." It's towing that line between being an equal, but also having a lot of humility and saying, I'm going to try to get everything out of this. And he remains one of my dearest friends and absolutely a mentor.
What are your thoughts about as you grow older, Julian, about passing these kind of ideas on and becoming the mentor?
Wow. Well, I think that's part of the life cycle of for at least my life cycle. It's like I've been the recipient of such generosity and kindness and good teaching, and that in many respects is a call to pay it forward. Mm-hmm. It wasn't for me alone. You know what I mean? I always feel like these lessons that I've been around, I'm delighted when if I'm teaching someone and they have something they're working through, and I remember hearing someone I respect talk about not that same issue, and I can say, "Oh my God, I feel like I was there to hear them say that to me so that I can help you. I'm starting to realize that's actually this. It's almost like I'm an aggregate for education. I just process a lot of it. I'm a nerd for it. I've seen a lot of I've witnessed a lot of really great teaching ability. There's nothing to do. This is nothing about my propensity for it. I've witnessed people crush it, and just deliver information in ways that transform a student. And you just go, oh my God, that's what a master does. So if nothing else, I'm kind of a fan of great teachers, and it's fun to be able to share that with others. And the fact that anyone would come to me to ask what I think I don't take for granted. I think it's a privilege. So, mentorship is baked into the whole thing. If you accept that, it definitely, it doesn't come with any kind of power struggle. I think there was a notion when I was younger, and to explain what I mean by that only the oldest and wisest and best people have the right to open their mouth and offer an opinion or a lesson. I think I was just intimidated, and that was my experience where I thought, no, I can't share anything. I'm the student. I'm the kid. What do I have to say? But what I realized is that in education, there's a very coveted area, or like you could say age range, where young teachers who are striving to grow themselves are also well suited to articulate the lessons they learned as a young person. And I recognize that I fall into that right now, where I'm studying my butt off and I like to share, but I'm not trying to galvanize like a methodology. I don't think I have any right to do that. That's why we go to Pat Martino and ask for a lesson. That's why we go to, you know what I mean? It's like with humility. But I do recognize there's a certain agency that younger educators have that is worth exploiting. Like, let's talk about it. Like, I'm struggling with it too. Maybe I can lend a voice to something that someone else is. Great. Am I the end all be all for anything? No, because it's still, I reserve the right to change my mind about all of these topics, as everyone should.
Well, let's wrap up this episode with something you kind of alluded to there, is that you've been doing a lot of these town hall kind of online instructional things through your website, Guitar.study. So tell me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, for years I kind of avoided teaching private lessons online. Not because I don't love teaching. I just always felt like I don't think anyone cares. That was always my feeling. Like there's plenty of good resources, great teachers, great videos, and especially in the age of, True Fire or Artist Works or lessons in Premiere or in any magazine. It's like there's resources. But when everything shut down, I was like, okay, this is my chance. I want to do it, but I want to do it very specifically. And what grew out of it was a platform called Guitar.study, where we host various teachers who teach private lessons, group classes, or town halls. Town halls are these kind of larger form things that I've been hosting. And there's a bit of a social activist tinge to it. So a portion of all the proceeds from everything that's sold through the site goes to different organizations that we're featuring at any given time. So currently it's women's reproductive rights in the South, a wonderful organization that works with that, climate change, and dealing with systemic racism. And because of that connection, I think it attracts a certain type of teacher to be a part of the roster, who has also maybe been thinking, how can these two connect? But very quickly, it's become just a home for cool guitar stuff, and that's where it's headed. So Guitar.study is my educational home right now, and I love it.
So other than you and Margaret Glaspie, who else is on there?
Well, Margaret has her own course. All her work is through Songwriting.study, which is incredible. She does something called mixtape seminars, which are incredible. These are kind of functioning like town halls with large groups of songwriters, and they completely break down and analyze recorded music and show how to apply it to the craft of songwriting, in addition to private lessons that she offers. So go there for Margaret.
Okay.
That's the best. In addition to me, Chris Eldridge, Courtney Hartman, Becca Stevens, Tim Lurch, Paul Asbell, and Sulin Hago, wonderful guitar player from the band Propagandi.
Oh, wow.
Punk guitar player. So anyway, so that's our motley crew right now, and it's evolving. Oh, and Pete Lalish from the band Lucius. So it's kind of everyone has a different piece of the guitar world in many respects, and it's wonderful. Check it out. And the newest component I almost forgot is Gerald Harsher. I'm a nerd for anatomy and body stuff. When I injured myself, Gerald Harsher was one of the people who helped me. He's a classical guitarist who teaches body mapping to basically for people with injuries, and he has a whole series he teaches through Guitar.study. So it's cool. It's kind of, and it's growing. We're working on a lot of new stuff now for it, but yeah, we're there for you if you want it.
Oh, well, that lineup sounds great, but I'm telling you, I don't know. I think that mixtape thing by Margaret, like as a non-songwriter, I'm like, maybe that's my window I need to open.
Go in. You will not be disappointed. She has an uncanny ability to do it beautifully.
Well, thank you so much, Julian, for hanging with us this week.
Thank you, guys.
Man.
Thank you so much. It's such a treat. I miss you guys.